All right, take two. We're live
Yeah.
again here. Lee Harrison, welcome to the podcast, man. I'm really excited to be able to have you on here. We just did like I don't know 5 minutes of going through, and you were having some little mic issues, and
Yeah.
so we're restarting it, but. Nonetheless, I'm excited to have you on here. You and I have got to know each other, I guess. I was on your podcast last fall, I believe. And
Something around.
Yeah, I think it was last fall. And then, and I just got to know you since then. I've talked to you quite a bit. And you brought up an idea to me of like, we were talking about live events and when I had my mountain buck scouting camp, and we were talking about some different ideas for things. And you were talking about with backcountry camping and just like the basics and going through some of that and things that I think gets overlooked a lot. You know, people look at specific gear, but not really the why they're choosing gear, or how to use it, all these different things. And I just think I think it was a really cool idea. So wanted you to come on the podcast and talk about it a little bit. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah. I'm glad that you invited me. It's a pleasure and an honor. Like I said the first time, long time listener and fan. I'm totally about the whole Rutstache nation. All about it, dude. But I really thank you for inviting me on, and I'm excited to at least share what I think I know with you.
Yeah.
Today. Yeah.
Well, hold on. You said you're all about the Rutstache Nation, but you have a pretty clean shaven face.
Dude, you know what's so funny is I literally just shaved my face this morning.
Did you have a mustache?
I did. Well, I mean, I had, I basically had everything, but my I guess my mustache was more prominent at the moment, So I was thinking about that. I was like, man, maybe I shouldn't shave, just out of like solidarity or whatever it is for the hashtag, or whatever. But it's literally clean, like few hours, like 10 hours ago or whatever it was.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's shining at me right now, so that's what I want.
Yeah, I mean, it's just got freshly moisturized and everything too. Because man, out here right now it's like super dry, so my skin is just getting abused by just the dryness. So.
Actually, I don't have just the mustache right now. I got like a little goatee thing going on because I was talking to somebody and they were asking about the mustache, and I was like, it's because I can't grow a beard. And so I was like, I want to see if I can maybe,
do the whole thing.
Age of almost 30 here, that things are gonna happen, and it's looking just as trashy as it always did. So
so it's so funny you bring up the can't bring it. Man, this podcast is getting in the weeds, but I like it because it's important, man.
It is important.
We're out here talking about men who can't grow beards, and it's important. Okay. Now listen to me when I tell you this. This might change your life. There's this thing out there called micro needling, and I don't know if you looked into it. But it's something I'm going to start trying. I haven't tried it yet, and so I don't know, but I grow really crappy facial hair around this section as well,
around the chin strap.
Dude, my neck is like so dumb with hair growth. I'm like, come on, dude, can't I just catch a break? Can't we just move it? Can I go into my settings real fast and move? But whatever. I don't really care that much, but so that I do not have the Rutstache. I am clean shaven, and that's kind of why, is because of the madness that is my facial hair.
Okay, I gotcha. That makes sense. No, I can't. I can do like the goatee part, and then as it starts to go up, it just starts to fade and start getting patchy, and it's and like ever since I was a kid, like all I wanted was like a beautiful beard. Like that's just what I wanted. Here. And I just was not blessed with that ability to do that. Like my younger brother, he can grow the biggest looking beard you ever seen. And
I was gonna say Kurt has a beard.
Yeah.
Like what? Like what's up with you?
Yeah,
like you just
I know.
Did not get that.
and I hate Kurt because Kurt's my brother, and but he'll like every once in a while he'll be like, oh, he'll grow this like big beard, and then he'll shave the mustache, and it's like full on Sam Elliott, like crushing mine, and I'm like, all right, you can stop now.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna get you like a $1 Shave Club membership. That way you feel obligated to keep your face shaven or something.
Ooh, that's a good idea for maybe for birthday, Christmas present, something like that. I'll do that for him so that he keeps a little bit, cleaner shaved. But no, I'm glad you brought that up. That's an important thing for everyone to listen to.
I mean, really, we could just end the podcast here, right?
Yeah.
We talked about the important stuff today, and that's what matters. There's so many like bearded men out there just laughing at us, like belly laughing at us right now. But you know what? I don't care.
Yeah, no, I'm just gonna rock the mustache, and it's been I haven't shaven it off, and I guess it's been since 2008. Actually, right before when I started the podcast, 2018. It's been 4 years since I've shaved it.
Wow.
Yeah, and I used to only do it during hunting season, and then I just did it for the first Total Archery Challenge event when I set up my booth to record the first podcast, and it became a thing. Prime Archery was there, and I'd worked for a bow shop at that point, and they filmed like a commercial with like just customers that use their stuff, and at the time I wasn't working with them or anything, and we just so they filmed that, and it went on the commercials for like some of their TV shows that they had sponsored basically. And I had Tim Burnett from Solo Hunter on my podcast like a couple months later, and he's like, hey, you're the dude that's in my commercial. And I was like, he's like, I just that mustache is very recognizable. He's like, you can't get rid of that. Like, that's your brand. Like, that's how people recognize you. And it, that's really what it is. And I have a very baby looking face when I shave it off. Well, at least I used to. I don't know what it looks like now, but yeah, you've got the baby face too.
Hell yeah. Man, I just got carded the other day. And nothing is worse than a grown man getting carded, buying beer or anything, especially like when you're past 21. I'm not close anymore, and I'm being carded. And I'm like, oh god,
that's funny. Yeah. Well, let's go back into the part a little bit here where you're talking about who you are and a little bit of your background. So how about you start off with that?
It's actually good that we're doing a second one because I'll give an abridged version to my first introduction. Hi everyone. Babyface Lee coming at you live here. I grew up in Rifle, Colorado, which was a really cool place to grow up in. It's hunting, fishing, all the things. My dad was hunting and fishing fool. So of course he was dragging me out. And like I was telling you, like my first time I can remember being kind of like face to face with a rut and bull elk, like September bugling, the whole nines. I think I was just young enough or just old enough to like walk a fair distance without like complaining about it and like, having to be carried somewhere. And I actually found a buck knife, like Excalibur, sticking in the ground. I could just barely see, a little pommel at the very end of the handle.
Yeah. Yep.
Not before that's the hilt, right? Where the knife starts.
You're talking above me now.
Okay. Anyways, I just saw like a little piece of silver sticking out of the ground, and I was like, oh, hey, what's that? And this was like right before this elk came in because we were sitting underneath a tree, and I was like, so I dug it up, and it's just like one of those, pretty like buck 112 or something like that. I don't know the models, but pretty
with the traditional
stereotypical buck knife. And I was like, this is awesome. I love everything about this. I just found a knife and it's mine now. And like, here's this elk going crazy. And it was a wild experience, but so grew up there, got to shoot my first bull elk when I was like 12, like, right when you could. Dad took me out 15 minutes from the house, and that's where we could get it done at. in a place that Teddy Roosevelt and his crew kind of dubbed Slaughter Gulch, because I guess they had a pretty banger day there.
That's really cool.
Back when he was president, actually, because when he was president, he would hang out at Hotel Colorado in Glenwood Springs, and Glenwood Springs is only a hop, skip, and a jump to Rifle. So I'm sure they like would ride throughout the whole valley and hunt and then go back to the hotel. So yeah, I guess they did that, as the story goes. So that was pretty sweet. Like as a 12-year-old to do that and like, and pack it out all with my dad and our friend, I think it was Dave Hatch. Anyways, Dave, if you're listening, yeah, so did that. And then, after high school and everything and Rifle, we went to college at Grand Mesa University, or not Grand Mesa University. I'm sorry. Man, now I'm not even going to Colorado Mesa University.
Well, you already went through it once. So for everybody, you're like, did I
you
this?
You just like cut it up. Colorado Mesa University, got my degree in marketing. Right after that, I was doing like real estate marketing, because that's kind of like what I did for my internship throughout college, just to make money and get experience and everything. And realized I hated it. A lot of like I just didn't really like the people a whole lot. Some were great. I still have friends who are real estate agents and commercial real estate agents, the whole nines. But I hated it. I truly did. So then I reached out to Seek Outside in 2017, summer of 2017, interviewed just like any other job. I think that a lot of people think that like getting a job at an outdoor brand is just like this ethereal thing that they don't quite know how to do. And it's just as simple as like apply, have an interview. If you are the right person for the job, you get hired. Right. And it really was that simple. Like I was like, it blew my mind at that age, because that's what I kind of wanted to do. And it just blew my mind that it was that simple, know? I was just like, oh wait, I don't have to like prove that I can shoot an arrow like 120 yards and like, I don't know. It's just, I don't know why I thought it was going to be so difficult, but I did. But anyways, I got the job and in like end of August 2017 and September of 2017, I was out using products for like hunting over Labor Day weekend and stuff. I mean, it was just like, they were just like, okay, here it is. Go out and play with it and figure it out, that way you can talk about it one day. Before that, I've done a lot of like backcountry camping and, that kind of thing. But not this kind of style. So over the last however many years, kind of like learning a new style of backcountry camping. And now I've kind of like been able to marry the two, right? And figure it out. So that's really my background in a nutshell, man. Photo, video kind of side of things now. It's the same with some like digital marketing efforts for the brand, but it's kind of me.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And it's funny. So like, I guess that would have been, I don't know if it was, that would have been, I think we went through this already, but I think it was 2017 when I bought my first Seek Outside Cimarron tent and bought it. Yeah, it was in 2017 and used that tent and still use that tent to this day. And then last year got the Silex and kind of building on that, loving those types of tents, lightweight and those floorless shelters have been really cool. And so it's been fun to be able to utilize that, the brand that I think it's cool because it's all made in the U.S., made right there in Colorado. I mean, you and I were talking before this. You're talking about them sewing and some of the people that you work with, and it's just, that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really cool company to get to work for, and glad that we could like put folks who love to hunt like in the right equipment, because it really was like the whole reason we started this was to make equipment for hunting. our equipment has since been like used for like all these adjacent activities, to hunting, whether it's like just outdoor stuff in general, backcountry skiing, whatever the case may be, which is cool. Great. Like, I'm so glad that those people are finding a use for it and that we're able to help them out too. But it really was like hunters that, like, the hunting is the reason we started Seek Outside, or the reason that the owner started Seek Outside.
Yeah.
That was back in 2010. So they've been doing this for a while.
Oh, I didn't realize that the company's been around that long. I think when I first heard of it I guess it was when I was getting into backcountry hunting. So that makes sense that I wouldn't have heard of it before then.
Sure.
But, when I heard it in 2016 and spent, a year researching and deciding if I wanted to spend money on it and go through that whole thing, got me with the stove and being able to put, make it a hot tent essentially. And it's been sweet. I've used it in a variety of different places, from Colorado to Pennsylvania and Idaho and everywhere in between. And it's been cool to get to do that and get to learn how to use that type of tent, which was not traditional from what I was used to growing up in the East. Floorless shelters just wasn't something that we were used to. And I've also bought like I had bought the nest for the Cimarron at that time. So if I was in areas like out east that have, snakes and a whole bunch of other critters that want to crawl in, that keep myself still away from them, I guess. But still having the ability to, like, just walk in your tent and not have to worry about muddy boots, and you just walk in.
Yeah.
That makes it pretty awesome. But honestly, just being able to learn how, like, the different styles of tents and their different purposes, and and this podcast is not intended, although you work for Seek Outside, to be just a commercial about Seek Outside. This is just really about tent camping and backcountry camping and some of the basics that come along with it. And it just so happened that I've used Seek Outside tents for my backcountry adventures, and you work for the company, so that's kind of how the affiliation there works.
And I don't want this to be a advertisement at all either. So I'll probably actually even suggest a couple of other products for people, like if they're just like, no way on the stuff that we make. Like, some people just will not buy kind of the stuff we make because it doesn't really, give them the comfy feeling, which is, it's just something to be said about the comfy feeling, having a comfy feeling. So I may even do that, like, even suggest other things that aren't Seek Outside, because that might be the right thing for folks.
Nope. I definitely appreciate that. So I was kind of thinking, like, how we would start, rolling into this, and like where to begin with. And when you and I were texting back and forth, you were talking about really starting with like the weight and the weight aspect, because that's something that when you start backcountry hunting or camping, that's you start having to carry all that gear in. That's a whole nother world. Like, you're getting in, you're having a lot of weight on your back, all these things. Weight does become, I guess, a concern and just an obstacle at that point.
Yeah. And so I'll kind of give you the three kind of verticals here that I was kind of thinking of. Was like, I started off when I was backpacking, I was like, had like the tub floor tents from REI or whatever, Coleman, just kind of like those things. For what you get, they're heavy. I don't know why. I don't know what makes them heavy. I guess the poles or something. But and then sometimes we do horse packing, which meant like canvas wall tents back in the day, back before I started to Seek Outside, which are great. I will say on record, I love canvas wall tents. They're like, there's just a feeling about them that makes me remember those days. And I'm just like, oh, man, cowboy stuff. I love it. But those are heavy. And then they require extra things, like either being close to a vehicle, or like I'm looking at this painting right here, or a string of horses, so they require some extra things that may not everyone have the, ability to use. Yep. Not everyone has 12, 6 horses or whatever. Which is usually what we end up using is 6 to 12 horses, depending on how many wall tents we were taking up. But then you've got like this, like kind of like floorless kind of consideration thing. I started off with just a tarp, right? Like literally a blue tarp, a small 10 by 10 blue tarp or whatever. I don't know how big it was. But that was kind of where I started my floorless journey at back in the day. Before Seek Outside and everything. So you've got like these considerations of weight, and when we start talking about weight, we talk about what's called base weight. And base weight is basically the total weight of your backpack and sleep system, just to make it super easy. And when I say sleep system, I mean like tent, sleeping bag, pad. Okay. And then anything that may require you to use those things. So like if you need to put a tarp underneath your pad, you got to count that as well. So just kind of take that into consideration. Ultralight backpackers and stuff, they will get like, 5-pound base weight. Obviously there's no way we could do that in hunting. No. If there was, I would have every single piece of gear on that list. And still be able to have, sometimes I need my 0-degree bag. There's no way that we could achieve that level of weight. Sometimes
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to touch on that a little bit for anybody that's listening. When you're saying like the difference between backpacking and hunting and the gear that's associated, which the hunting gear typically is a little bit heavier when you start doing that. But why is that? Like, why does it need to be a little bit heavier? Or maybe it doesn't, but just give me your explanation on that.
Yeah. So typically, and there's really 2 different reasons. Typically it's the weather. A lot of backpacking or through hiking, as we call it. And that through hiking is basically when you start at one end of a trail and you hike all the way through to the other end. So like when people take 4 months out of the year to hike the Pacific Crest Trail and do it all in one go, that's through hiking. So typically when people are doing stuff like that, it's during the summer months because they can't traverse those mountains in the winter months or even the fall months sometimes, or spring, whatever. So typically it's there. Everyone's doing it during the summer. So we can use quilts, which lighten up the load a lot. We can use like these super lightweight, just EVA foam Z-rest pads, like the accordion style things, which they're great for weight, but they suck to sleep on. I mean, I might as well be
terrible to sleep on.
Yeah, I might as well be sleeping on the ground, and so I cut the one I had, I cut up and I make it into sit pads now. But yeah. So where was I going with that? So we're either doing it in the summer months, which means like lighter equipment.
Yeah.
Or they know that they're doing this trip and they won't be doing another trip for however many years, right? Because then they got to go back to work and get enough money to do the next one, or whatever. So then they're buying these backpacks that are literally just like a sack. And by the time they're done with the trip, they look like they've gone through hell and back,
Mm-hmm.
And they're destroyed and they throw them away. And then, they're almost like disposable backpacks, like how we used to take disposable cameras on trips.
Yeah.
It literally like almost the same thing, like disposable backpack. When I'm done with the trip, I just throw it away. Disposable sleeping bag. When I'm done with the trip, I just throw it away or gift it to someone or whatever. So typically it's like warmer weather, which means lighter gear. And then these people are, trying to save every ounce because they're doing so many miles or, at least for the thru hikers, backpackers, there might be a little bit more crossover.
But even like the backpacks don't need to haul the weight. Like they don't need to be able to be capable of hauling 100 pounds or 150 pounds, out of the woods.
Yeah, I remember talking to some guy and he was like, yeah, I'll never get over like 30 pounds. I'm like, bro, I start over 30 pounds. I don't leave the truck with, like it goes in the truck with 30 pounds in it, just because we got to take things like, kill kits, which usually require like a knife or two, and sometimes even a heftier knife, So we got some bigger things we got to carry as hunters and as backcountry hunters. Some people still bring in saws and like axes and stuff, which if you want to save weight, figure out how not to use those things. Like figure out like what's required to not have to utilize a saw or like a little hatchet to like break pelvis bones and stuff like that. One, it'll save you a whole lot of time. And two, it'll save you a lot of weight. But I know some guys it's like what they've always done, so they'll always bring it, and that's fine too, dude. But like you got to realize it's also going to come at a.
I brought an axe with me on my second trip in backpacking trip, and it was when I had the Cimarron, because I was like, I need to cut firewood, I need to be able. But look, I didn't realize that like this isn't Pennsylvania, and in Colorado, everything's dry and you can break most of the stuff that you're going to burn like very easily. And so I just carried around basically a weight with me, and I never used it on the entire trip. Like, I mean, I guess I did use it, but it was just from the standpoint of I wanted to feel good that I had it. So I just used it.
Sure. I've literally backpacked with a cast iron skillet before, because I wanted to cook in a cast iron skillet once we got to a lake and caught some fish, and that's what I wanted to cook them in, and I don't regret it. But so that's why we usually say that backpackers have lighter weight stuff, is just because of the season, and then typically because of like the style of gear that they're purchasing.
Yep.
So going back to base weight, I would say if we can get around a 15 to 10 pound base weight, we're pretty money. 10 is like really light for hunters, especially if you can get 10 in a late season style hunt situation, like kind of gear packing list. You're doing really well, and I want to know what it is.
You might want to check over your stuff again, see what you forgot.
Yeah, make sure you didn't get anything. So maybe start looking at like what your weight, like what all that weight is. And if we can start, like if we can only pack in with 50 pounds, like if we only have 50 pounds, and you got to remember food. We're backpacking with all of our food for however many days we're going to be out there, and if it's only a weekender, we're not going to be that heavy. But if you're coming out west from the east and it's a 10-day trip, or you're like, maybe you just retired and you're like Beau and you just retired. Yeah. And you're going to take the whole month of September. I've seen it happen. I've pulled up to trailheads and guys are like, I'm here the whole month. Like I'm free as a bird. I'm happy as a clam, and I'm here for it. Great. But if you're going to start backpacking, or whatever, just realize that it's about like 2 pounds per day or such of food. Yep. I'm even more closer to the 3 pound per day area, just because I eat a lot. I expend a lot when I'm out there, and for some reason I sweat like it's going out of style. So I'm just consuming always. And I don't pack light stuff. Like sometimes I'll bring bagels. Sometimes I'll bring, an ungodly amount of gummy bears, which are stupid heavy. I don't know why they're dense. I don't know what it is about gummy bears that make them so heavy, but gummy bears. I am going to switch up. Here's what I'm going to switch up to give me the crunch, but still give me the sugar. I'm going to switch up to Nerds gummy clusters. So if you're familiar with like the Nerds world, yeah. I was in the gas station the other day and saw these Nerds gummy clusters. And I love those kind of snacks, like the gummy bears and stuff. But I was like, it would be nice to have some crunch when you're back there. So that's what I'm going to do.
You need to help me figure out how to pack chips into the backcountry without crushing them, because I eat just regular potato chips like it's going out of style. Like that's my guilty pleasure. When
Pringles
I come back
cans.
That is an option. That's definitely some weight there, but that might.
But bulk, yeah.
Yeah, bulk and weight. But the thing is, maybe I'll just trade my spot and scope out for that.
You're like, who cares?
The animals.
Yeah, who cares about it? I don't need to see animals. I just need to eat chips.
Like
right?
when I get back to the truck, it's like whole bag, just pound it. Like that's like my guilt. Like I look forward to that when I start feeling weird when I'm out there. Like that's all I want is like this. That gives me that comfort.
Sure. So here's what I'm going to do this year because I found it this year. I didn't pack them with me, but they were in the truck, and I remember pounding them when I got back to the truck after a Montana archery hunt. Peanut butter pretzel bites.
Oh,
so they're like they're like little pretzel ditties, and they're filled with peanut butter. Oh man, and they're salty, and then you got the peanut butter, so you get a little bit of protein and calories and carbs. But then they're crunchy, and the crunch is just. And so I might like try to pack those and they're a little bit more substantial, like you can kind of bang them around a little bit more and not crush them. But I might pack those into a bag and maybe like put them in my lid or something. It's a little less getting banged around a little less more. But yeah, we could sit here and talk about food all day. I literally think about it all the time when I'm hunting. I'm like, I bet you I could pack, I think about it all the time. So, but yeah, so we're carrying food, which is heavy, as well. So you got to think about that. So, you're talking about 2 pounds a day for 10 days, it's 20 pounds of food right there. And hopefully you might be able to find some things to minimize that. But let's say we're at the top of that, base weight mark, that's 15 pounds. Now we're at 20 pounds for food. We're at 35 pounds and we haven't really even packed any of our hunting equipment. So that's where we start getting closer to that 50-pound mark. To pack in for those longer extended stay hunts.
Tripods and spotting scopes.
Tripods, spotting scopes. I haven't been bringing a spotting scope with me. I have a pair of 12x50s. That could be, I could totally see farther if I bring a spotting scope or upgrade to a 16 power, vinyl, but it's worked for me so far, and I'm not going to jump ship until it stops, but then I might suggest someone, hey, just bring a little pair of 10x42s, and maybe if you don't mind, pack this spotter, if they can save some weight and I can, they can bring a spotter. If we're both going to utilize a spotter, I try not to be hey, you mind carrying my gear around for me? Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
So I do try to do some things to save weight in that regard. And hunting out west, can offer different things. Like you may absolutely need a spotting scope. High country mule deer hunting, I'm bringing a spotting scope and I'm bringing the biggest one I can find. I'll have I'll set up a telescope station on top of the mountain if I could. But then I might be hunting elk, and I know I'm hunting this burn area, and I'm going to be in tight, and it's going to be thick. So I'm just 10x42s or my trusty 12x50s. So we can mix and match and get away with some stuff here and there. So don't feel like you're oh man, now I got to find a spot for this scope, and it's gonna.
Yeah, no, I never carried a spotting scope until I started doing more spot and stock stuff, or things where I was trying to see longer. I mean, caribou hunting, high country mule deer, I'm gonna take it spring black bear because I'm gonna be sitting there behind the glass all day. Mm-hmm. Those are the types of things. Where elk hunting, I don't carry one. Yeah. I did in Idaho, and it was more open country. I just carried, Maven has one of those little tiny S2s. They're super, the 12 to 27. They're awesome to be able to carry because they don't weigh much of anything as compared to other spotting scopes, I guess. They're not as powerful. I wouldn't use that scope on a high country mule deer hunt, or that I wouldn't use that on that type of hunt. But for it's all situational, I guess.
Yeah, totally. So in terms of weight, kind of think about that. And then it's also really good to figure out how much weight you're comfortable with beforehand. And if you're out east, it can be hard to, be like, okay, well, I'm going to go get on the steepest, gnarliest thing, because it's probably still not as steep or as gnarly as most of the stuff you're going to be climbing up out west. Now there are occasions, but even just like a lot of people call it rucking. I'm sure pretty much everyone who listens to this is probably familiar with that term.
Well, if they weren't, they should listen to the podcast before this, because I just did a whole podcast with my buddy Todd, who it talked about the basics of rucking and how to do it properly and everything. So yeah, they should. If people are listening in chronological order here, then they'll know.
Yeah. Hey, we did this on purpose. This is like this is all planned. So yeah, I mean, like, go ruck or whatever you want to call it, walk. You don't have to call it rucking if you don't want to. If you're just like, oh, that's a weird term.
Yeah, but that sounds more badass,
Yeah, rucking does sound way, way cooler. But, put your pack on, go walk around with it, and don't just like mow your yard, because I doubt your yard is that big, or big enough to like really make a difference. I see a lot of people be like, oh yeah, put my pack on, mow the lawn, and I'm like, dude, it takes me 2 minutes to mow my lawn. Like it does not take me that long, and you will not find the discrepancies in your system in 2 minutes.
Well, I have to. You must have listened. You must have been listening in on this episode that I recorded with Todd yesterday, which at this point we're recording, it hasn't released yet. But because I told the story where I'll push mow my lawn with a pack on, like, and I have a bigger lawn, so it takes a couple hours. But,
okay. Yeah.
But nonetheless, when I used to literally put 100-pound sandbag in there and just destroyed my body, because that's not a good thing to do either. Because I was like, I got to prepare right for the pack out, and that was dumb. So don't do that. But I just you brought up that, and I just started laughing because,
man, I'm just in your mind today. But yeah, I mean, like, go and like, try to find some hilly stuff to walk up and down, and especially down. Down is where you're going to kind of figure it out, and this is just kind of finding your body's limitations, not necessarily gear. It'll help with the gear limitations as well, but your bodies. And then you're going to be like, oh, wow. 50 pounds ain't going to do it. I need more like 30, 40. So now we kind of have to, now we're trying to start and figure out what we can afford for weight and that kind of deal. So now we've gone through this whole process of figuring out where we're going, what we're doing, how much weight we can, how much weight we can afford. Now we can start buying gear, which is great, because that's some of the people's like most fun things to do. I will admit, I love gear. I'm like, right before this, I was looking up arrows. So, arrows, but I love gear, but I also love doing things, and I like doing things more. So you should, you kind of have a healthy balance between the two.
Because lightweight gear is expensive. So like there's this balance, and like what I've told people is like, buy the best that you can afford at the beginning, but understand that there's things that you may need to upgrade, that you can get away with for a year, and then, maybe next year you buy something else that's, a little bit better to replace that original thing, because it is expensive trying to buy all that stuff.
Totally.
It's not, and each ounce is like $100. Isn't that what they say for, for sleeping bags? I think is like the term
something like that.
It's something. It's something crazy.
Yeah, each ounce you cut off or something like that is $100. Yeah, like you can get a 30-ounce sleeping bag, but it's going to be $800.
Yeah.
And it's going to be expensive, but it'll be nice. Western Mountaineering makes them, and they're fantastic. I did buy a Nemo this year that was like on the cheaper side that I really enjoy. 15 degrees. And I used it kind of down into getting closer to 0 in Montana, and it wasn't bad. Just kind of like layered up with some long johns and stuff like that. So it wasn't bad. I always run.
I haven't done any like real late season camping, hunting trips yet, but I've always run like a 20-degree bag or a 30-degree bag, and I just wear my layers in there so that I can kind of, cut down on the weight a little bit. Like I have a Marmot synthetic sleeping bag that was light and was on the cheaper side, relative. I mean, it was like $230 or something, but that was pretty cheap for a lightweight sleeping bag and synthetic one at that. And then I last year I used Sitka has that Aerolite one they came out with, that 30-degree bag where you put your hands out and it looks like you're it looks really funny, but it's super functional, and I don't care what people say when I'm using it because it's awesome. I can get out and I can take a piss, and I don't have to get out of my sleeping bag. I can cook my food inside it. Like it's pretty legit.
So I have and I had no clue if this is true. I only know because of what some people who from Seek Outside have like told me about gear and being in the military and sleeping bags, specifically being in the military, is that they were required most times to sleep with their arms outside of the sleeping bag and sometimes position on firearms or just being ready to get out and motate if stuff were to go south. And I know that John Barklow is a big designer over there, and I know that he has a huge military background. So I want to say it's from the military. Kind of like just him being like, this is what we did in the military. And I think it would be great for this application as well. But I have no clue. I've never spoken to John in my entire life, like face to face.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but I'm speculating.
Yeah. No,
but it's cool. It's a cool design. I dig it.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. But anyways, the sleeping bag thing, like that's a place where, you can throw a lot of dollars at. I guess my moral of that story is that gear is expensive, and you kind of got to pick and choose, what you're going to go with there. So,
yeah. And then we can start to, now that we're like going into the gear area, obviously money's going to be a factor. Don't really need to talk about that. Like, obviously don't plunge yourself into debt. Don't get a divorce over this stuff. Like, just
buy your tags first too.
Yes. Yeah. Buy your tags first, put stuff away in your savings, all that stuff. Okay. Now on to the fun stuff. So like we're trying to figure out gear, and most of that's going to be like tents or sleeping bags or sleeping pads. And for the tent portion of it, it's going to be a little bit trickier. One, you're going to have to look at size and where you're going and how cold it's going to be. If I was going to Pennsylvania right now, I would definitely have something that had some protection from bugs. If I was going to Pennsylvania in November, I wouldn't really care because they're all going to be dead.
Yep.
So just because you're going to a place that does have ticks sometimes out of the year does not necessarily mean you need like a whole bunch of tick protection or whatever. And then size, how many people are going with you, all that good stuff. That's, just get the right size of tent for how many people are going to be staying in the tent. But going back to where, we can start to look at, okay, do I need a tub floor? Do I need a single? Do I need a double wall shelter? Is canvas going to be all right for me? Canvas is great. It'll get wet. It'll keep you dry. It is waterproof. Well, it's technically not waterproof, but it's like water resistant, right?
Yep.
But it molds bad. So there, you got that kind of deal, and it's heavy. And then, okay, well, do I want a double wall, like kind of lighter weight shelter?
So explain what double and single wall is,
okay,
like the definitions of the two.
Sure. So a double wall, you can look at as like your typical Coleman tent. So you have like your inner tent, with usually the dome is like mesh.
Yep.
And then you have like this rain fly that you affix to it with like some rods and some like little tension things. That can be considered a double wall. But a better representation of double wall is like you have an internal tent and then like some sort of external tent with like a vestibule. And the internal tent is a breathable material. And the external tent is obviously waterproof. So there's your double wall. Hilleberg makes them like double wall, Four Seasons style shelters. Single wall, and Hilleberg also makes some single wall style shelters. They're not just double. But single wall is like literally just like I said. So like canvas is a single wall, technically. But like most of the stuff that we make at Seek Outside starts as a single wall shelter. Now we do some modular things, but you know, if people like look at teepee tents and just as a general form, it's a single wall shelter. And it's great because we can really lighten up things. Not a whole lot of bulk. We can start to mash things down and fit them into little crevices in our pack, and it's great. The only kind of discrepancy there with single wall shelters is condensation. So if you have a really small single wall shelter, you're probably going to get wet if it's rainy. And when we can talk about like the conditions here in a second, and how that might affect your choices. But like small single wall shelters, you're going to get wet. So like really small Hillebergs and stuff like that, unless you can vent them, you're going to get wet. Really small Seek Outside shelters, unless you can vent them, are going to get wet, and you can vent them. Just kind of plug.
Yeah, but and quick story on that is when I first got my Cimarron, I didn't know the whole venting process. I was new to single wall tents, and when I was in Colorado, I had it and I was tight to the ground. Like I had no airflow that was coming in, and I was also running that stove, and then we had snow, and then it started melting it, and then it was like creating that condensation inside. Then the wind blew and it was like raining inside the tent, which was operator error of like not having it vented properly, and so that was something that I learned the hard way, but it doesn't have to be. And I guess that's where kind of testing your gear and in different conditions can be super beneficial.
Yeah. And venting it is not too hard. Sometimes it's just like unzipping the bottom a skosh of the bottom of like your door, unzipping that just a little bit so air can sneak in. And then we have a vent at the top of our shelters that it can circulate. And then if you have the stove in there, it's great because you can start to bake it off from the inside as well. We do offer products like the liners, and now we didn't back then. Sorry. We make Cimarron liners for those especially wet condition style hunts. And the liners are, pretty inexpensive compared to the whole kit and caboodle. And they basically turn your single wall shelter into a double wall at, 10 ounces, 9 ounces. So, there's kind of your answer in a monetary form, like it's not like a skill thing. It's just like I buy this thing and now I could do this.
Yep.
But like opening up the door just a little bit, obviously if weather permitting, sometimes it doesn't. And then, pitching it up and off the ground, again, weather permitting, sometimes it doesn't. And that's just kind of the way it goes,
Yeah.
But, so, going back to single versus double wall, now we kind of have this idea of like, okay, I really don't want to deal with condensation. Perfect. Go double wall, or get a suite of products from whatever company. I'm sure there's some other companies out there that make stuff similar to ours. I don't really know of any other companies that make stuff like liners, but I'm sure they're out there. We've been seeing a ton of like competitive stuff kind of pop up lately, which is great. Like it gives people the opportunity. Like I would obviously have some things to say about why you should buy Seek Outside stuff, but shop around, please. So now we know whether we want to go single or double wall or what we're comfortable with. Also, a lot of the double wall stuff is freestanding tents. It's not like something you need to stake specifically into the ground because, like those dome tents, they got those things that cross, and that's kind of like what's keeping their form.
Yeah.
So some of them are freestanding.
Where the single walls take a little bit more skill or practicing on how to set them up and make sure that.
I would say that after you're practiced at setting up your single wall shelter, especially if it's something like a pyramid style shelter, it's much faster than a dome tent and much less frustrating, and you can do it better in any weather conditions. And, we're not the only ones to make mids. So I'll kind of plug myself here. If I need to keep giving myself credibility, I don't know if I do at this point, but, but I will say that like setting up something like a pyramid style shelter is way easier than a dome tent. After you've gotten some practice at it, figure it out, watch whatever YouTube videos or whatever come out from that company on how to set them up, and then practice it in your yard, do all the things, get good. And then go out. So that's kind of the whole rundown on single versus double wall. And that's a pretty easy answer too, especially like I said, with a lot of the companies offering some sort of double wall opportunity. And now we're kind of moving on to conditions, like what are conditions going to be like? And this might even help you choose the single or double wall stuff. And that's like if you're going to be in really wet conditions, like that's kind of like the thing that's like the what draws the line between some people's decisions. But I will say there's some upsides to having a floorless shelter in wet conditions, where if normally people would be like, well, I want a floored shelter, like tub floor style in super wet conditions because I don't want anything to get wet. My personal argument, not Seek Outside's argument, my personal argument from doing this for however many years now would be your stuff is going to get wetter and stay more wet throughout the trip if you use a tub floor style shelter and it is dumping and you have no extra days to dry it out or do whatever. And I saw this firsthand on a Smith River trip in Montana, and it was in May because we couldn't pull our permit for June, which is kind of like the money period. It's warm, drink a lot of beer, hang out, and everything is just right in the world. We got in May, which is fine. We brought a rifle and some stuff to hunt bears along, because you can do that along the river there if you pull a permit. This guy had a tub floor style shelter, and it just, after about day 2, just started dumping rain, snow, and it didn't stop for like the next 3 days. His whole thing got wet, his whole system. And I had to like bring him into the Red Cliff with the stove. I didn't have any extra tarps for him to sleep, so I just had to put him straight on the ground in his sleeping bag, try to, get him as close to the stove as possible. And keep them in there. And it's surprising how fast that ground dries out once you start getting a big stove cranking in there.
Yeah.
But that will cause condensation as well, so it's like a kind of a two-edged sword. You get the stove cranking on wet ground, all that condensation has got to go somewhere, and usually it gets caught on the tent. But if you got it hot enough in there, it gets baked off again, and away it goes out into the atmosphere or whatever.
Yeah. Another condition I had one time with running the stove, it was a late season rifle hunt for whitetails here in Pennsylvania.
Cool.
And me and my buddy packed in, we had this Cimarron, so floorless pyramid style shelter. Yeah. And we were in this like creek bottom, which this kind of goes to the campsite selection portion of it a little bit. We'll touch on that is because with thermals coming down, I didn't want to spook any deer up on the hills, but the problem was the area was soft under that frozen ground, and so when I started heating up that stove, it started turning to mud inside the tent. And all we needed to do is really I could have moved the tent 10 feet and not been in this little kind of mushy place, but it was hard to tell when it was a little bit frozen at the beginning, and it was like right around that. It was like freezing rain, so it wasn't like frozen solid. It was just like I don't even know the right term for it, but so that was like a learning experience for me there. And that's also when it comes down to your gear. So for me, like whenever I'm using like a single wall tent, which I like from the standpoint of it's so lightweight, and that is, one of the huge benefits for it. Yeah. But I'll use a synthetic sleeping bag during that time because it dries out and you can dry your gear out, especially when you have a stove in there, to be able to basically cook yourself dry where down kind of clumps up and doesn't work as effectively for that.
Yep. Yeah. And that's like another gear selection thing too, is synthetic versus down. And some bags now are making really great treatments, so that down hopefully never does get wet. I used a down sleeping bag in Alaska on a Dall sheep hunt, and it wasn't terrible. We did get a lot of rain, but we had a pretty, we never really got a lot, wet a lot on the inside of our tents. So we were doing all right. But yeah, let's since we were talking about it, let's like break down that situation, right? Yeah. That you just talked about. So you had a single wall shelter. You made the decision to buy a single walled shelter because the marketers at Seek Outside were so incredibly good at their job.
That was before you. So.
Yeah, it was before. You're like, hey, wait a second. Yeah, a little bit. No. So you bought a single walled shelter. That's what you were using. And now you were going to go hunting with it, set it up in a camping spot in a creek bottom, which is like big no-no. But like you said, sometimes you just can't really get around it, right? Like you don't want your thermals to mess up your hunt. I'm 100% with you. Sometimes the hunt trumps placement of your camp and everything else over everything. Yep. Whether it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable or not. And so like you said, if you would have just like, say like you got your depression like this, I'm kind of making a thing with my hands here. For those of you not watching the new video format that Beau's got coming out, if you would have just moved up here a skosh, try to find a flat spot and like 25 yards up, it would have been so much better. And it's crazy how different the dirt acts just 25 feet up, and you can still be kind of, in that same, thermal range right there. But, now the air is not even as wet. Like I'm sure we've all had days like where you bomb down into a creek bottom and you feel alive because the air is just so moist down there, and then you go back up and, up on top of a ridge looking for mule deer. And then like the wind's just sucking everything out of you. And then, it's just dry and you're like, oh God, this sucks. I want to go back
chapstick out and you're slapping the chapstick on.
Yeah. You're like, I just want to go back down to that creek bottom, man. That was like an oasis. But so the air is wetter down there and that's going to cause condensation as well. So just popping up a little bit, especially if like, that creek bottom's not getting a lot of wind because of terrain. If you can just get up where it's just getting a little bit more wind, obviously we don't want to get blasted with wind. But if we can get just a little bit more wind, that helps with that ventilation thing we were talking about. And so, for example, like in Montana, we were hiking up along this creek the whole way, just following the creek up. And, when we stopped to make camp, it was like, okay, we got a nice flat spot, literally right next to water. Great. But, having worked for the company and been doing this for as long as I did, I said, let's take it from here. And let's just like jump up on this little bench that's not too far a walk and get right there. Like almost no condensation until it just started dumping rain. And being the kind of like, I don't know, sissies or whatever we are, we were like, well, let's not bring liners. Wow, we work for this company. We don't need liners.
Yeah.
We could have brought a liner or two once it started dumping rain, and snow, man, it really started snowing on us, but it worked out. We were able to kind of minimize it with the stove and some ventilation. So, But with no weather, we were perfectly fine, just up out of the creek bottom. So there's kind of like the breakdown there. If we could just find a little bit higher spot just off the creek. And I know that sometimes it's night, and hey man, just gonna have to do.
Yep.
That's fine. Like, again, like sometimes the hunt is dictating where we put the camp, not vice versa. And it is what it is at that point. But yeah, there's a little bit of tips and tricks we can do to help us have a better night out there.
So what about campsite selection, like on, like, say, a ridge? What are the pros and cons of doing something like that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I just had a phone call with the guy the other day who's like, yeah, man, sent me a video of the Red Cliff just getting hammered with wind. And he's like on a knife ridge, like smack dab in the middle, like 60-mile-per-hour winds. It stayed up. It looked like he popped a stake or two, but they weren't like really integral, because we send a few bigger stakes to put like on some of those like integral staking points for the tent. And that might happen. Any night in a 60-mile-per-hour wind night is awful. It's never fun. I don't care what tent you're in or how experienced you are. It is miserable because you're not going to sleep. But I wouldn't put it where they put it. It was smack dab on the ridge. What we want to do when we want to stay high, and because I'm assuming we're going to want to stay high, that's why we're looking up here, and we want to maybe glass from camp, or maybe that's because, hey, we're going to just pop over to the other side the next day, and there's bucks in that basin, and we want to stay close. I'm a big proponent of staying close to animals, like camp almost on top of them, but not quite. And I run a very, very quiet camp. I think that Ryan, who we did the podcast with, I don't think he likes hunting with me, because I'm like, no beer until we're back in the truck, killed something. And it's like, we never stop whispering until we get back to the truck. We leave the truck whispering, and then we get back to the truck and we can talk loud again, Yeah. That's because I'm there to hunt, that's kind of my take on it anyways. But yeah, so I'll camp close to animals if I have to. So, if we're trying to stay high, and whether that be to so we don't have to then gain elevation again to get somewhere, or to get to critters, or to stay in glass, we want to just get off the top of that ridge. So vice versa to what we were doing in the creek bottom. We just wanted to just get up off it, right? Now we want to just barely get down off of the ridge. If we can get down 25 to 50 yards, I'll just off of the top of the ridge and find a nice little bench. That would be great. Hopefully the wind just doesn't come straight at us that night. But typically, it doesn't do that. And there's features in the mountain that help it keeping from doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we want to find a bench that's just off the knife ridge or whatever we're on, that we can set up on, because then it's not too long of a walk up to the top, and we're kind of keeping ourselves one, out of the wind, and two, especially for high country mule deer hunting. And I know but usually if you're elk hunting, you're not really up on ridges. So this is why I keep talking about like bucks and things like that. Two, it's going to keep us out of lightning danger. So in August, early September, those high country mule deer hunts can get scary, especially when your hair, you look like, what's that Muppet? That's just like always getting electrocuted.
I know you're talking about.
Yeah. When your hair is just standing up and like everything is just like electrified and everything's just like flash bang, like that's pretty scary. And I've spent nights like that. And again, you don't sleep, and you're every second you're like, I might just pack up and run down the mountain real fast. And really you should. you never know when you're going to be that one dude who gets struck by lightning. You just never do. You should get down if that stuff starts happening, because it will kill you if you get hit, or it could hit a tree and start a fire. And the further you are away from the epicenter of that thing is better. So yeah,
man, lightning scares the shit out of me out there.
Same.
It's in the high country. It's a whole other world, and it looks beautiful to have, like, really great for pictures, having like a campsite up on top of the ridge and like just beautiful. But for me, I like to be down over, like you said, from the lightning aspect as much as anything else, and staying out of that. I've done it before, where I've been up there and then the winds are so bad you feel like your stakes are pulling out, which is now why I always put rocks on top of my stakes. It's just
that's a good idea.
An extra form of that. And I'll even, if I know I'm going to be in like a high wind area, I'll get like those long stakes that have like almost like a cyclone to it. And use those too, just because of that. But we provide some of those now. Those like big long
twisted stakes. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, but that's more of like, okay, that's like your trying to think the technical term for that type of control for it, where like the best thing is just to not be in that situation. So finding a campsite,
preventative over reactive, I will caveat the rocks on top of stakes thing with one thing. And that's because sometimes people will do the wrong thing when they think that they're doing the right thing. Rocks on top of stakes themselves is fine. Rocks on top of the tent, on top of like a sod skirt, on top of any material is the wrong thing to do. So it doesn't sound like that's what you were doing, which is, I mean, if you were, who cares? Just don't do it anymore. No matter what tent you use, because that abrasion will end up wearing a hole through your tent over time, if you continually do it. But rocks on top of stakes is great. It'll definitely help keep that stuff in there.
All right. No, I was in the clear. I was good.
Yeah, you're good. A plus.
But no, and then the other thing too, and you kind of mentioned it, but I just wanted to add a little bit to that, is where you're talking about, if you're planning on hunting a certain basin or something, you want to be on the opposite side of that, so you don't have those thermals at night that are pulling down.
Yeah.
Versus, because then you can camp up high, but you're not running into that issue.
Yeah, exactly. And you're exactly right. If they're in the basin to my right, I want to just jump off the side to my left. And that way, my scent over there in that basin is minimized. And even if I do, kind of clang my titanium mug around at night, it's not, causing too much ruckus. But like I said, I usually go pretty quiet and go to bed pretty early and then wake up pretty early. And I would probably wake up and just creep my way over to the other side and probably get another 30 minutes of sleep while the sun comes up, and then just be there right when I can start seeing out my spotting scope and stuff in that specific instance.
Yeah.
Unless I know that there's like bucks there and I'm like, okay, I want to kind of be in this area, so I might have to walk a little bit farther. But even then, I try not to, if I'm that close to critters, I try not to walk in the dark too much, because they're up moving around. They're not snoozing like I am. They're up moving around.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And the other thing with campsite selection that I've run into too is when you camp up high, a lot of times is water is low. So you just gotta have that into your mind that, okay, I might have to drop 800,000 feet to 800 to 1,000 feet to get water. And if I want to camp close to the animals, that's something that comes along with it. And that's not saying don't do that. It's just saying you got to understand that portion of it too.
Yeah. And once you're understanding all these things and kind of coming to terms with them, right, it just makes it, I got to go get water. It doesn't make like, oh, now we got to find water somewhere. And it's really good to do that all ahead of time, with the whole e-scouting thing. If you can't get boots on the ground, find the water, and then I like to drop pins, like, and I name them like possible, blah, blah, blah. And this is how I do it. Possible, whatever area I'm in, camp, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And then I'll denote that with the critter I'm chasing for that specific camp's icon. And then every critter has its own color. I'm really nerdy with it.
We have a whole podcast on icon, how I go through and I do similar things. I don't do it where I have the different critter that I'm chasing on there. I'll use like just the camping icon within the Spartan Forge app, but I'll put like, I have different colors for different things. And then the icons, like all my accesses are a certain color. They're all black that I have like potential accesses. My campsite's a specific color, potential camping locations, glassing points, another thing. And I always, potential water sources, those types of things. I always have that stuff marked, categorized. I do the 1, 2, 3 thing, like you just said. And,
it just makes it easier. When you're like, okay, now I see bucks over there, where the heck am I going to stay? And I usually try to like find and a lot of times in Colorado, especially Utah, Nevada, you can find like this string of basins where it's like a one ridge, and then all the little finger ridges that jut off of it create all these like basins that you can string together once you get on like the main ridge, right? So then now you can like bop to 3 different basins in a day and check them out. And then when you're doing all your e-scouting, you could be like, okay, here's camp for this basin, here's 3 different campsites. For this basin, here's 3 different campsites. XYZ, etc. Which you should totally do that. But like sometimes you're just gonna have to bomb off and get water. Sometimes you'll luck out and you'll find a spring coming like right out of the top. We did that once in Montana. There's like a spring coming out of an old gold mine. I mean, almost like literally, I don't know, 70 yards from the top. And we were like, this is so money, dude. Obviously we filtered it a lot, because who knows what's coming out of that mine. We never got sick. So that's good.
But I can just tell, talking with you, that something was in the water there. I got something from that trip. Hey, I've had Giardia once, and the second time was what they called a gastrointestinal infection. One was from hunting and one was from fishing. I was fishing like an Easterner, fishing for largemouth bass in a cattle pond. And I was doing the Western thing where I like tie everything with my mouth and teeth, Don't do that. It's bad. I do especially where cattle poop, man. I was like, why did I do that? But it's just what I always do. Yeah. And and then I got Giardia while hunting mule deer, high country mule deer, actually. So that doesn't sound like a lot of fun either.
No, they both sucked.
Yeah.
And the one I got during COVID and my hospital experience was awful.
Oh, I can imagine.
Can I even say COVID? Are we going to get banned if I say it?
Probably. You just said it twice now, so the podcast will be taken down.
just bleep me out. Yeah, that was during bleep. People are gonna be like, what the heck? What is he talking about? But yeah, so redacted. Redacted. Just your voice coming up, redacted.
Yeah.
So obviously water is a consideration, and you just kind of, it's like the hunt kind of comes before your comfort on that one. But after that, the really wet conditions and the really high elevations are the two kind of like juxtaposing things where we're like, okay, like these are two the biggest considerations we have. Is it going to be super wet? Are we going to be super high? And then from there, it's kind of just like tweaking everything in between. Like elk hunting, you can go from a super small, ultralight little bivvy spike camp shelter to a huge, just luxurious, town of tents. And the wind is not a factor, and and everything's great, and you pack in beer on horseback and all the good stuff. So it's like we can really do anything with some of this gear. At least like once we've made our decision about what we're gonna buy, and depending on what we're gonna do. Like if you're the guy who's like, hey, I got these horses, or I've got this 4-wheeler, and I just want to go, and it's more about hanging out with my buddies or my family than it is about getting after this like huge adventure. You could be doing both, but maybe you're just not doing one of those this year. And then that's kind of like what we're trying to figure out when we're trying to decide on what to buy and those kind of considerations. So, some people might be like, yeah, I'm just going to get a huge tent and we're going to have a lot of fun, chase some elk around, and just kind of bop to different places and bugle and see if we get anything back. And if not, then that's all right. And that's fine. Please do that. I love doing that. That's a lot of fun, especially like antelope hunting. That's what I pretty much do for antelope hunting. Antelope hunting is just one big laugh-a-thon, because I blow every single stock, but it's just like, hey, let's take all like these big tents out there and go chill and hang out and have fun. And but then when it comes like elk and mule deer hunting, then I'm like,
a little different. And that's like for me, actually when this podcast releases, I'll be in Montana bear hunting, and that's what we're going to do, is like the truck style camp, and, have just like that fun atmosphere. I don't want to say it's not fun otherwise, but you know what I mean? Like,
but it's more laid back
camp feel to it. Hike into the spots every day and come out, camp, cook a nice dinner, have a couple drinks around the fire, whatever it is, like just have that feel to it. I think there's something to be said about that, which one of the things that I'm excited about is that I'm going to be trying out the courthouse, which is one of your guys' is like basically like a wall tent, but super lightweight material. And I'm pumped to be able to have that there, because so for me, I have like a very, I've talked about this on the side too, but like I just love the deer camp feel. That'll be bear camp, but like the deer camp feel. And like I want to use this thing in the east, during hunting season, have guys there hanging out, like that feel just. And I think of that when I think of wall tents, and when I think of mostly from a Western perspective, but also in the East. And I think that aspect is super cool. And I'm excited to get to do that, and then not pack that extra weight in. I can go in a little. I'm going to have to walk further, but it's going to be lighter weight on my back.
Yeah, man, I'm totally right there with you about the deer camp feel. And I'm not even from like the Midwest or the East or whatever. I've gotten really big into duck hunting lately. And that's because I'd never go alone, almost never. That's because I like to hang out with my buddies, my dad, and it's cool to watch dogs do their thing. But it's like that's not really like a crazy adventure. Like it could be, but for some folks it could be, and that's awesome. But sometimes it's just fun to have the camp feel, like the deer camp, the elk camp, the whatever camp feel. Got friends there, got family there, hanging out, having fun, or like we said, being more laid back. We should say being more laid back.
Being more laid back. Yeah, that's probably a better way.
Everything, it's all fun. It's all fun. We're just more laid back. Because like high country mule deer hunting is not as laid back. Like we'll just call it what it is.
No.
Especially if you're like got a really good unit, like sure, like 5 years into this tag, and you're like, oh man, the pressure's on. I really want to get a nice mule deer from this unit. But
I don't know. I've really come to like those style of hunts and camp feels and atmospheres. Like it's just, it's pretty sweet. It is.
Yeah, it's fun. And honestly, it's probably what got most people into hunting. The crazy high country mule deer, sheep adventures, probably didn't get most of us into hunting. It was probably the hanging out with dad and uncle and grandpa at deer camp or whatever that got us into hunting, not the other, you know?
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree. And I love, don't get me wrong, I love the backcountry hunting like we talked about. Like it just has they're different places.
Yeah. And I do both of them every year. Yeah. Every year. It's not like one year I'm like all in on the backcountry stuff. I do both every year. There's a trip planned for, you know, the laid back stuff. There's a trip planned for the more kind of high adventure stuff. And, you know, and then there's some trips that are kind of in between where it's like, hey, we can make it whatever we want to make it. You know, and I do it all and I just love doing it.
Yeah.
But definitely. Yeah, there's just like different considerations for camping with the two things. And once you kind of figure out what you want to do first, because I'm sure you want to do everything just like I do, but once you figure out what you want to do first, you can start to kind of dial in that gear system, whether it be new gear or whether it be just saying, hey, I can use my gear that I have right now and just apply a couple of these other things. Like, yeah, don't take your Coleman tent and sit it right on top of the spike ridge. It will blow away. Yeah. But you might be able to take your Coleman tent and get just down off the knife ridge, and you might be all right. You know. Yeah. So you know, take that in consideration as well. Just don't put it right on top.
Yep.
Please, for the love of God.
That's some good advice. And the one last thing that I wanted to ask you about was camp cleanliness and organization there. So talk a little bit about that. And this is something that I'll have comments on too. So, but I want to hear your side of it first.
Yeah. Well, I mean, camp cleanliness mostly comes into safety when we're talking about bear country, right? That's like the number one thing. That's the sexy thing to talk about is like bear country, what to do in grizz country, right? But it'll also help with just your typical critters, squirrels, whatever, field mice. We can keep them out of camp as best as possible. You know, when you're sitting there at night and you're eating your Pringles, you know, even though you're out in the mountains, try not to scatter those things everywhere, because something's going to smell that Pringles in there and try to come snag it. But aside of like, you know, just being clean for that reason, hanging stuff in the trees is going to help keep bears away. And again, the squirrels and all the little things that can chew through your tent or chew through your sleeping bag and maybe ruin the hunt because now you've got like this gaping hole through your tent because a bear walked through it, or you know your sleeping bag's been chewed to bits by squirrels and stuff. I've seen it happen. I've seen a squirrel for whatever. I don't know if my buddy put his tent on top of a ground squirrel hole or something, but it chewed through the bottom and then it got into everything. We had a loaf of bread. We had a loaf of bread, and it literally it drilled a hole straight through it, long ways, not width ways, long ways. Just drilled a hole straight through it, and, you know, just basically just leaving the crust and a little bit around the crust, and just had it went crazy in there. It was like a smorgasbord buffet in there for that guy. That squirrel probably died of obesity. But
yeah,
but you know, like that, like literally all our food was done. And we were like, well, guess we got to leave or go get more food, you know? So, you know, that's like a trip ender maybe. I mean, just depending on how long you got or what you've got going on, that could be a trip ender. And you just don't want to end your trip of a lifetime because of this freaking squirrel ate your food, you know? And we were on a pretty fun trip, and it was like a bummer that we had to back out and get food. But yeah, just keeping the camp clean for basically the critters is really the big thing.
Yeah, and also like one of the things that I've done in bear country is put all my food. One, I'll have them in like the gallon Ziploc bags for each day, and then I'll put them in a dry bag, roll top dry bag, and even hang them in the tree. Hang them in a tree a little bit away from camp. Or I've kind of gotten sloppy with that a little bit, and I just keep them in that bag, and I feel like that keeps the smell out from them. So I don't know. I've done it both ways. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
And it does help with the smell, the Ziploc bag, right? Because it's supposed to be airtight, so air shouldn't be leaving the roll top bag. I'm sorry, roll top bag. So no air should be leaving. But I would still hang, man. I mean, bears got crazy noses, and it might not even be the smell, because we're going to get food on the ground, right? Like that's going to happen. But if they get attracted from the smell of food on the ground, and then maybe hit the bag of food up in the tree and move towards the tree, like that's preferable, because hopefully they figure out, I can't get to it. Never mind, I'll move on. Or whatever. Or in the middle of the night, you're not having a bear come and visit you in your tent. You're hearing a bear trying to climb a tree and snag this food, and then you could pop out of your tent, bear spray, gun, lights, the whole nine, hooping, hollering, and deal with the issue. But I would still hang. I mean, we've started doing it, and even if it's not too far, like I know like the little organization that basically does like all the bear safety initiatives, say like 200 yards or something like that. I've never done that. As long as you can, do it far enough away that makes sense, and don't go on a huge hike just to go get your food every day. But we're just trying to get the bear's attention away from what's in our camp to the tree.
Yep.
And that's really it, because honestly, if a bear wants to get to stuff in the tree, he can probably get to stuff in a tree one way or another. But let's make it hard for him. Grizzlies can't really climb trees, so that's a different story. But I mean, I've seen crazy things, man. I've seen video of a grizzly trying to shake, like it's off of a movie. Like he's trying to shake a hive to get honey out or something. Like, and he's shaking the tree trying to get the food to come down or something. I was like, this is wild. But just keeping camp clean, just so you're not having your trip ended on something silly like that. That would suck.
Yeah, and then the other thing I'll add to that is your camp organization. This is me, the way I am with it. But like, excuse me, I want to have everything organized in a way that I can find it and need it. You just don't add any of the additional stress or anything that comes around with that. Like knowing where all your stuff is, your hygiene stuff that you're not taking with you daily hunting, and everything's like in, and I like to keep them in some sort of a dry bag or some sort of a container that's there. Now, like have
a trash bag for camp.
Have a trash bag.
I do that too. Yep.
Yeah.
And I hang that too. I hang that as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So take the time to do that, and also just your other gear, just so you don't lose things and then you can't find it, and it just helps to keep things that way. And for me, having different bags that are organized, like this is for, basically, like your kill kit, this is for my first aid, this is my, all that stuff, having that organized, knowing where it's at, repack your bag for the next morning, that night before, because you're going to be running all over the place in the morning. You're probably going to sleep through your alarm a little bit, and you're going to be running late. You can't get to the glassing spot. All of these things are just little tips that can help with that organization. And so I go back and forth, and I'm not trying to open a can of worms here, but like when you're packing your bag, like I was always one of those people that had everything in different bags, but then it doesn't pack really well. Like when you put it in your backpack, I guess what I mean, like if you have everything in their own bag, it just like is lumpy and weird, and it doesn't pack really well. So sometimes I'll even just have empty bags in there and have the stuff I'll have the pack stuff the way that it needs to, and then if I get to camp, then I'll organize it inside my tent, so it's just not thrown everywhere.
Yeah, gear explosions can eat up time for sure. And I think you hit the nail right on the head there. Just like keep everything dialed, keep your camp, organized, not only clean in terms of like garbage, food, whatever, but keep it organized. Do it all at night, the night before. Even if you're like really tired, you're going to be more tired in the morning and less wanting to repack your bag in the morning when you wake up. So if you just do it real fast, maybe eat first, or do it while your food is like boiling. If you got like the jet boil stuff going on, like if that's how you're eating food that night, or even if you've got your camp cook with a cast iron skillet making tacos, like do it then. But yeah, keeping gear organized, that's a good one. That's a good one. And I don't always subscribe to that, man. I wish I did every time, but then sometimes I forget.
Hey, it's good to strive for it, and then sometimes you're gonna fall off. But
yeah,
and
then you kick yourself for it.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we missed, or anything else that you think that you wanted to touch on? I felt like we covered a lot in this time.
A little bit, like just a couple little tips and tricks would just be to like learn some like really good knots, things to do with cordage. Almost every tent out there could do with like a little emergency cordage kit, whether it's to do guidelines, make makeshift stakes and stuff like that, dead man anchors, which a dead man anchor is a really good way to stake in soft ground or even no ground. That is just like, you wrap something around a rock, like whether it's line, or sometimes they make dead man weight bags that you like affix to your staking point, and then you put the rock in the bag.
Oh, okay.
And that's your stake. So, I mean, just carrying a little bit of cordage and just like having this knowledge banked away of like, okay, if I forget my stakes, I know I still could do the thing. Just don't ever forget your stakes. Number one, just keep them in the bag with your tent.
Yeah.
But someone just did it in our troop. They forgot their stakes, and we were showing people how to stake a tent with no stakes. And you could do it for sure. But yeah, like just bring a little bit of cordage, and just have a little repair kit. Luckily enough, these tents, as long as it's not canvas is a little harder, but most ultralight tents or even semi ultralight tents, are really repairable nowadays. And it could be just as easy as taking it's like literally a sticker, and you take the sticker off the thing and you put it on there, and it adheres to the material, and away you go. So kind of like just keep that stuff handy, and because you never know, branch falls off a tree, smacks your tent, you got a couple of holes in it now that you got to take care of. It shouldn't like let's try to stay in the field as long as possible, and that's the whole reason we have most of this gear, is to help us be there longer and do the thing. So let's have a little bit of redundancy or emergency style kit. Learn some cool knots. I don't know as many knots as I should. I will be the first one to say it. I should know a lot more knots for working for the company I do. But I know enough to be dangerous, and I just run it that way. But the more knots you'll never not use them, I feel like.
I need to refresh my knowledge on knots. Before I went to Alaska, I spent a lot of time watching YouTube videos on different knots, and it was helpful. And then even like with the tents and stuff, different ways that you can, with the Silex specifically, like how you can tighten it down with different knots and doing, there's just like, there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah. Yeah. So did you buy that Silex for Alaska, or did you buy it for Colorado?
That was for Colorado.
Okay.
Yeah, I used Hilleberg up in Alaska.
Yeah. Was that a single or double wall Hilleberg?
That was a double wall.
Okay. Yeah,
that was a double wall. I can't remember the model, but it had like a big vestibule. It came out. It was a bigger.
And that's typically what they are, is like that. Yeah. What is it? It's like the inner tent is like yellow, right? I've only spent a couple of nights in a Gila bird.
The inner tent's yellow. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like another one of those considerations. Like you're in a really wet environment, that might be the way to go. I don't know. How was I've never stayed in a tub floor style tent where it's like Pacific Northwest or Alaska style precipitation. How was your experience? Like,
it was good.
Was it just soaked inside or what?
No, I didn't have any complaints with that. One of the things that we did do was, because we were able to bring some more clothes, so I didn't necessarily have to like dry everything out on my body inside the tent. That vestibule was so big and it had like a line that we hung in it, so I'd hang some stuff out there.
Oh, cool.
And then it never rained for like days on end. So like then I'd be able to put it outside the next day and the wind and sun and stuff would dry it if anything got wet. But so we were able to keep it controlled from going inside of the tub, I guess. But awesome. It worked pretty well. It held up pretty good. But we had some nasty weather, but probably not what some have experienced in Alaska. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, no, that's good to know that it worked out well for you, because like we offer some tub floor style accessories and stuff, and we just try to make sure that what we got is a good option for folks. One, to be competitive in the space, sure, but two, so we're not like just offering folks stuff that doesn't work, and we usually keep it pretty dialed, especially with all the experience that the owners had, that we've had. Yeah. Like myself and a few of the other guys on the team are really involved in the product design process. So that helps.
And I'll tell you this, like I think there's so much that comes down to just your knowledge on how to use stuff. And like you were saying, like with the selection of stuff, and maybe, that you could use a different type of shelter, but you need a liner for this or whatever it is. And just like having this knowledge base is so much more important than that specific item of gear that you have. And
and that's like I said, like
I talk to people like you that know more than I do about it, because I learn, and anybody can learn by that. And I think that's super cool.
Yeah. And that's why I said, like, just know you could probably make it happen with the Coleman tent. It might suck. It might be like a little bit more wet. You might have a little bit more fear of the tent blowing away. But like we said before, tags first, marriage second, gear third. But like you could probably make it happen. Just try to like bank these things away. And that way, like if you are dealing with like less than ideal gear, you can make up for it with your own skill. Because that would probably, for you personally, be a lot more cooler than being like, oh yeah, I went and spent $10,000 and got all this gear, and then I was able to make it happen. If you would be like, yeah, I did it with like minimal gear and use a bunch of my knowledge and skills, that's a lot cooler.
Yeah, I built a tent out of conifer tree branches, and I used moss
that dude. That's why I work for tent companies, because I don't know how to do that stuff.
No, me neither.
I'm no Clay Hayes. I can't build an entire hunting cabin in however long he did it on alone. The TV show. I don't know how long it took him to build that thing, but yep. And that's, not everyone has those skills, so sometimes you do have to get the stuff to make it happen. But you'll
balance.
Yeah, you'll never regret having a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of skills when it comes to stuff out there, and just making stuff work with what you got. It's never going to be perfect. My hunts even today are never ever perfect. Like it never just goes off without a hitch. Nothing's wrong. Everything's great. I always fill my tag. Never. There's always something. Sometimes I don't fill my tag. Sometimes I'm a little bit wet. Sometimes a little bit cold. And I'm like, man, I really want to go eat some Chinese food. That's literally was the topic of like a 2-hour long conversation one time while elk hunting. It was like what we were going to eat at the Chinese buffet once we got back into town.
That's funny.
But yeah.
Well, Cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on here, Lee, and talking to us here. So, would you be willing to give a shameless plug where anybody can find out more information on you and the company and whatever else you want to kind of throw out here at the end, and I'll add it in the show notes as well.
Yeah. So the company I work for, Seek Outside, you can find them at seekoutside.com, Seek Outside on Instagram, and Seek Outside Gear on YouTube. Same thing on Facebook, all the things. I think we have a TikTok now that has a total of like 2 things on it. So if you're there, you could go look at those 2 things. We might put more there. We want to start doing more video content just because it's a lot of fun for us, kind of selfishly. But we hope that you guys might like it too. But it's a lot of fun for us. But yeah, go there, check our stuff out. Please call, email. We have a full customer service team there at the shop that are backcountry hunters, that are ultra runners, that are mountain bikers, that are all the things, and sometimes all of the above, depending on who you talk to. We did just get our ultra runner employee on his first hunt, and it was a turkey hunt. He didn't kill anything, but it was a good first hunt to be on, to kind of not spoil him,
Yeah.
It's just like horrible weather for turkey hunting, but so call, email, do all the things. And hopefully I get to talk to one of you guys, and you can tell me how dumb I sound on the podcast, and yell at me for not knowing as many knots as I should. But yeah, that's where you guys can find some stuff about Seek Outside.
Perfect. Well, thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on and chatting with me here. And
absolutely,
we'll be talking again soon.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you.